So, the lesson for today is coming to America. The Industrial Revolution, especially after the end of the Civil War in 1865, ushered in a new era of massive immigration to the United States. For example, prior to the Civil War, most Americans lived and worked on farms. But by the turn of the century, 1900, most Americans were moving to or already living in the nation's largest cities and working in industries such as manufacturing. So this is them on the farm, and over here's them on the cities, what the cities look like at the turn of the century around 1900. So first we're going to start out with the European immigration. That means they came from Europe. By 1880, the United States had already had a large influx of immigrants. However, between the years of 1880 and 1920, over 23 million immigrants made their way to the U.S., most of them from Europe. On the next slide, you'll see a world map along with a breakdown by continent of immigration to the United States. Okay, so we look at this chart, the key over here, talking about Oceania, which is now basically what we consider Australia and some of the outlying islands. Non-specific means we don't know exactly where they came from. The blue color is the Europeans that came. The red is the Asian, orangish red is who came from Asia. The yellow is the Americas, of course, and the orange is Africa. So we look over at 1820, immigration. Oops, that slid in there for some reason. Immigration was pretty low, and most of it was from Europe. And you see, European immigration was quite strong between 1800 and 1920. After that, you see it kind of slowed down. People moving around the Americas, South America, Central America, things like that, or Canada, started picking up around 1900. Some of it happened 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, not much in 1890s. Then in 1900, you had a surge from 1900 and 1920, and then 1930 on to the 2000s, a lot of them, other Americas, from the other Americas, people started coming over. You look at Asia in the 1980, 1990s, and the 2000s, a lot of people started moving here from Asia. Africa, don't see a lot, see a little surge in it from 1990s and 2000s. And non-specific, not a lot. Oceania, not very much, had a little bit in 1980s and the 2000s. So you see people came from all over. A lot came from Europe. There's a big surge right there between the 1880s and 1910. All right, in the late 1800s, most European immigrants came to the U.S. from Northern or Western European nations such as Germany, Great Britain, Ireland, and Sweden. Right there you see a big surge in Western Europeans. By the early 1900s, however, that had changed as most European immigrants coming to the United States were coming from Eastern and Southern European nations like Italy and Russia. Regardless of when they came to the United States, almost all European immigrants were looking to escape a life of poverty. Back in Europe, many of them had very few opportunities to prosper economically, basically to make money. Meanwhile, in the United States, the American economy was booming thanks to the Industrial Revolution, and there were many jobs available. American factories were producing like never before, and the factory owners needed workers, lots of workers, to work in their factories. European immigrants helped fill that need. While many of the Europeans who came to the United States during this time were in search of better economic opportunities, some came in search of religious freedom. Specifically, Jewish immigrants came looking to escape religious persecution in Europe, where because of their religious beliefs, they were denied many of the same rights afforded to others. Ellis Island. Any of you ever heard of Ellis Island? It's a pretty important island in the history of the United States. Excuse me. Many of European immigrants who arrived in the United States in the late 1800s and early 1900s arrived at a small harbor on an island just off the coast of New York City named Ellis Island. While at Ellis Island, immigrants would be asked about their intentions for coming to the United States and where they planned to work and live. They were also checked for diseases and pests such as fleas and lice. So basically, they went through a medical screening to make sure they weren't carrying any diseases from other countries that might, hurt the population of the United States. They also want to know their plans, so that if they had a good plan, then fine. So they wanted to make sure they wasn't increasing the population in poverty. So they wanted to make sure they had a plan and a plan to work and where they wanted to live. The whole inspection process immigrants went through at Ellis Island typically lasted between 3 to 7 hours. It's estimated that close to 40% of all current U.S. citizens can trace at least one of their ancestors arriving to the U.S. via Ellis Island. I know I can. Back in the, I think it was 1880s is when some of my ancestors came. I know my wife's ancestors came in the 1880s. And they were German immigrants that actually had been living in Russia until the Russian Tsar was overthrown. And at that point, they moved out of Russia and came to America. Between the years of 1892 and 1924, Ellis Island was the busiest immigration station in the United States. Asian immigration. It wasn't just European immigrants coming to the United States during this time. Large number of immigrants from Asian nations like China and Japan were coming to the U.S. too. See the spike right there in the black. Located on an island in San Francisco Bay, near the city of San Francisco, California, was the first stop for Asian immigrants who made their way across the Pacific. It was called Angel Island. Unlike those who arrived at Ellis Island, those who arrived at Angel Island often had to spend weeks or even months, not hours, before they were granted permission to enter the United States. This is because immigrants arriving at Angel Island had to undergo a much more thorough medical examination, which resulted in a much lengthier admission process. So let's talk about the Asian Americans coming here. Of course, we know most, if not, well, just say most of the citizens of the United States during this time had come from Europe. So if they're coming from any place other than Europe, they're a little more leery of people coming from other places. So that is probably why the immigration process at Angel Island was much more lengthy. It was a prejudice, more to put it bluntly, against the Asians. They didn't trust them, they didn't like them, and so they made it much more difficult for them to enter the United States. And that's just me putting it bluntly and telling the truth. Okay, now let's talk about the National Park Service. The National Park Service. Today, both Ellis Island and Angel Island have long since been shut down as immigration stations. However, both have historical designations from the United States National Park Service. Angel Island has been designated a national park landmark, and Ellis Island has been designated as part of the Statue of Liberty National Monument. Which brings us to this, the Statue of Liberty. A gift from the people of France to the people of the United States, the Statue of Liberty was actually built in France and then shipped in numerous pieces across the Atlantic and assembled in the U.S. It was fully assembled and dedicated on a small island near Ellis Island, just off the coast of New York City in 1886. Now, a little more background on that. It was shipped over here, but nobody had the money to put it back, to assemble it, nor did they know where exactly they wanted it. There was a gentleman in New York City, a businessman, who lobbied or persuaded a lot of donations and a lot of his own money as well to build the Statue of Liberty monument as you see it today. It took a lot of money and a lot of workers, but he fought for that, and that's why we have the Statue of Liberty today. The story is much more involved than what I just told you. So if you want to look that up, it's a great story. Maybe I'll put it on the website for you so you can see it. For the millions of European immigrants who arrived in the United States at nearby Ellis Island, the Statue of Liberty not only became an icon of freedom, but a symbol of the welcome as well. So, that's our lesson for today. Again, I said we have optional videos for you to watch. I would encourage you to watch them. It's not mandatory. They give you much more insight and a lot more answers, and they're pretty entertaining most of the time. And then you'll go and look at our key vocabulary for today's lesson, and then you'll work on your assignment. There are two different assignments. One is multiple choice questions. One is fill in the blank questions. They're both just below on the webpage. You can do those. Remember, use your notes. Hopefully you've been taking notes. And then you're done for the day. So I hope you like this short little lesson here about Angel Island and Ellis Island, as well as the Statue of Liberty. And I'll see you next time for Social Studies.